And today's topic is going to be stress and working with educators. It's part of our Educator Wellbeing series. And so one of the things that, as we get started is that it's important to understand that this material is drawn and developed with a partnership with Georgetown University, our colleagues here. It's a work that we've been doing for some time, and we're really happy to have an opportunity to share it with you. Next slide, please. And so this presentation was prepared under a cooperative agreement with SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's just important to know that our funding comes from a number of different sources, and SAMHSA is certainly one of the partners that we work very closely with. Next slide. One of the things that we always like to do is to make sure that we have a plan in the event that something should go wrong technically. And in that case, if there is a problem with security or if things break down, what we'll do is send out a separate email to everyone who is registered and present. And you will then have, instructions on where to go after that and how to get reconnected with us. And so an overview of who we are as a person is that there's a Center for Applied Research, CARS, one of our partners here at Georgetown, the Center for Child and Human Development. We are really happy to work with Change Matrix because what they do is they provide us with a reference and a referral source and a partnership with Change and looking at equity. We also have our friends at the University of Texas. There's MedStar at Georgetown University, and you can see FREDLA, which is the Family Run Executive Director Leadership Association. And when you think about the work that we do and the work that you do as educators, being able to have a partner who is skilled at developing leadership within parents is just a wonderful partnership. And then Youth Move, they keep us honest with having a youth voice. Next slide. And so our goal is that all children, youth, young adults, and families with emotional and behavioral health needs can have access to evidence-based treatment. And one of the things about that is that it's not just about the treatment for them, it's also supporting the professionals and paraprofessionals and parents and family members who are in the lives of these children. We want to make sure that we have timely, useful, and data-driven resources for them. Next slide. And so we serve a number of different cross-sector audiences that are listed here. We provide technical assistance and training at the state level for primary caregivers, the school workforce, like many of you who are here today, community-based providers. And again, that idea of it's not just about those people who have letters behind their names, but including the expertise of parents and family members. Next slide. And so this is a wonderful illustration of the many different places that we have a hand in helping in the ways that we do it. We provide practical tools. We are in the podcast. I'm kind of old, so podcasts are new to me, but I'm told they've been around for a while. We have the 5-Thing Digest. If you go to our website at the Georgetown webpage, you'll see all of these things and find opportunities to join us. Please do. Next slide. And so today's facilitators, pay no attention to that man in front of the curtain. That is me. I'm Michael Riveras. That's my Wizard of Oz reference for those of you who didn't catch that. We have Benjamin Hayes, who is working with us, and just a wonderful gift of someone who will lead us a little bit later in reflective exercise. And I want to be clear that I will be going over the nuts and bolts of stress. But when we do our opening exercise and when we close with Benjamin, this is a perfect example of what it means to be reflective and to take that time to learn the skill of of really taking more control over how we perceive things. And then we have my colleague, Pamela Trivedi, who Dr. Trivedi is someone who has been doing this work for a little bit of time, but she's younger than me, so I can say a little bit of time. But it's just a wonderful resource and someone that I can thankfully call friend as well as colleague. And so let's dive into what we're doing today. And because I'm all over the place, it's always good, and I appreciate people who are able to say hello and say where you're from. That's always good to know who we are reaching out to. I'm in Texas, just north of Dallas. And so at this point, I'm going to share the con or hand it over to Benjamin, and he is going to lead us in a grounding exercise. You will be tested on this later.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that warm introduction, and welcome everyone. All right. Yeah, we'll start off with a simple grounding and meditation exercise. So taking a moment to get settled in your seat, it can be helpful to rock back and forth a little bit, just adjusting your posture so you can find some uprightness in the body and some relaxation. Again, finding some sense of uprightness, some vertical energy flowing from top to bottom, but also finding that relaxation. We'll start today with some conscious breathing. So bringing your attention to your breath, starting with some deep inhales and exhales. Let's count to a count of 4 for the inhale and a count of 6 on the exhale. For the next minute or so, just letting your attention stay with the breath, counting to 4 and exhaling to 6. Let's bring our attention to the world of emotions. See if you can gently become sensitive to what mood or emotions are present for you right now. Bringing some curiosity and a sense of allowing to your emotions. Oftentimes, there are actually multiple emotions that can be present. So see if you can name a few that are present for you or have been present for you today. Tuning into the emotions, becoming sensitive to what is here for you right now. And the invitation is to become sensitive in a way that does not push anything away or try to fix anything. Instead, just opening to what is here for you. Opening to your emotions and to the mood. Maybe even telling yourself, it's okay. It's okay to be like this. Now, gently bringing your attention back to the space around you, back to the sensations in your body. And in just a moment, we'll open the eyes and start our presentation for today, but just setting the intention now to bring a little of this presence, this awareness that you've just cultivated, to try to stay with that throughout today's session. Setting that intention now. When you're ready, we'll gently open the eyes and come back to the space. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Next, I'll pass it back to Mike for more exercises.
I hope I unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Great. Now, one of the things that you may notice, and again, this is a testament to the process of working with someone like Benjamin, is that the rate of my speech is slower and I'm more intentional in how I present. And I really, as I think reflectively about where I am, who I am, and how I use stress, having an ability to do an exercise like this for me really means a lot. It's not some kind of thing that I do just to trying to make sure that I have this opportunity to demonstrate this. It really is about being able to take that moment and pause. And so with my stress, I'm not able to see the slides that you have up. I don't know why that is. I can't see your screen, Pamela. Can everyone else see her? Okay, there it is. Thank you. And so for some reason, I just have a big picture of me as well. But what we're going to do right now is to do a Jamboard session. And what I would like everyone to do is to just give a word or two about what comes to mind when you hear stress. Could you please go to the Jamboard? And to get to the Jamboard, in our chat room, there is a link that Joanne has provided, and I would be remiss not to thank Joanne for all of the work that she has done. She does so much work behind the scenes that this truly would not be possible without Joanne. So what comes to mind when you hear the word stress? If you could just go to the Jamboard, it's in the chat room, posted in the chat room. And if you click on that, then you can go. And then if you look at the icons on the left, the one right there that is being has a little finger under it, you get a sticky note and you can just enter. When I hear stress, the word stress, I think about. We'll take a few minutes. And some of the words or adjectives that we're seeing are it's chaos, worry, fatigue, too much going on, overwhelmed, not being enough, not being able to please everyone, back-to-back activities, being hurried, absolutely, exhausted. These are all words that describe stress. And I think that many of us have had that experience of like, we can, relate to all of the things that are up here on this Jamboard. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about the components of stress. And we're going to talk about the strategies that we can employ to reduce, mitigate, help us use stress. Because in addition to reducing stress, one of the things that we want to be sure that we do is make sure that we're able to understand how to use stress effectively. And so with that being said, we're going to go to the next Jamboard.
I just wanted to, just 1 second, Mike. I think that this is a really important one that somebody put up: pain in the body, tightness and tiredness. And I think sort of
absolutely
the kind of how we hold stress in our body, I feel like is something that's really important for us together to explore. And I do feel like kind of mindfulness activities and some of the restorative approaches that Benjamin is helping us understand can really help with release. And that's something we want to work on together in this community. So thanks to whoever put that one up. Yeah, let's go ahead and move to the next jam here.
And I will say, when I was working with young children, I would often talk about the cat at Halloween with that kind of arched back and the afraid look of, that cat had to be holding. some type of stress? And how can we go from that cat to being a cool cat? Because one thing I know are cool cats. And so let's talk about what are some strategies that have been helpful for you in coping with stress? What are the things that you share with others when you talk about stress or you talk about self-care? What are the things that are helpful in coping with stress? Okay, I like that. Let's talk. That's a very empathic way of, oh, that's one of ours. Okay.
Well, it also would be a good one.
Yeah, it would be a good one. A morning walk,
Mhm.
physical activity like weightlifting or running. Love it. Gardening is what someone has posted in the chat room.
Mhm. Nice.
Prayer. I like that. Meditation, prayer. Setting and honoring healthy boundaries.
It's a great one.
Yes.
Making a lei.
Making a lei.
Nice.
Yoga. Bringing careful, curious attention to stress, allowing it to move through us and not pushing it away. I really like that because that's a very mindful response of someone who has been very thoughtful about understanding what stress means and how to process stress. Dogs and nature. Stretching out my back. Again, a very physical approach to helping moderate or modulate our social emotional centers of our brain. Holding my bunny. You know, for me, and I'll just share this, I was in a staff meeting earlier this morning, and one of the people who was in the meeting, it was a Zoom meeting, their a toddler child was with them and on camera. And it's just something about young children and just their curiosity and the ability to, that I actually feel cortisol levels and all those things that accompany stress just go down. It's just, you know, that's one of the wonders of the world is how just a baby who is happy and secure can change the mood of a room by just their presence. Watching waves roll and carry out. Somebody lives in a very nice place where we have
Yeah.
waves and they're able to watch the waves come in and out. And so these are all wonderful examples of how we cope with stress. And one of the things about these series is that we often feel we have so much that we want to be able to share with you. And so we're going to move on. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about about stress. There we go with the slide, and how we cope. And so one of the things to understand is that stress is physical, it's mental, it's emotional. There are components of all of those in stress. And actually, we know that there's good stress. Preparing for this presentation, I got to tell you, you know, like I stress myself out every time I do a presentation, and my wife sits on the side saying, you know, people always say you do a good job, but why are you stressed? It's because I want to prepare. And so, and I think that really helps me. And I try to couch it there. But if I'm honest with myself, there are often times where I could do a better job of not allowing it to be so stressful for me. We're going to talk about harmful stress. That is the stress that overwhelms, it discourages, it drains the mind and the body. And if we have harmful stress in the classroom for both the teacher and the students, what are the implications? And what are the strategies that we can employ to lessen that, but also to have a more informed approach about how we deal with stress? And so it's important to note that there is good stress, there's bad stress. And we're going to talk about both of them. Next slide, please. And so I did mention this a little bit about preparing for a presentation, but if we have stress in our lives, or that kind of good stress, for those of you who are younger and don't understand what a map is, it's the piece of paper that they're looking at in the center. My kids would be lost if they couldn't use their phones and their apps to figure out where they are. And quite honestly, I am now in that group where I need to have that with me in order to lessen my stress. But the ability to get out, to be amongst nature, to be able to make a lay, or to go see the ocean. I'm so jealous. Those are the things that are really things that help us modulate or regulate the stressors that we may have in our lives. And so, next slide, please. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the differences between helpful stress and stress that can wear us down physically and emotionally. And the thing is that it doesn't need to be, when we think about stress that may wear us down, it's not that one seminal event that is wearing us down. It is often the drip, drip, drip of repetitive things that start to wear us down emotionally. The helpful items are usually much less in time as far as how long they last. And they're things that, we get up for and we go down. I was recently working in the United Kingdom, and they had this wonderful commercial about the British Marines. And they say that, the thing about being a Marine is that it's the possibilities. But and you get put into situations where you don't know how to react, but Marines are trained to change the possibilities. And so what that commercial is saying is that they're in stressful situations, but how they look at the situation is often so much more, that is what makes them not just good, but great. And so what are the things that we can do to change the way that we look at something if it is a stressful situation? Let's go to the next slide. This was a study done by our colleagues here at Georgetown, and I don't know if others are seeing some dark banners across there. If they are, and now there's another one. Okay, but it's okay. Go back to that one. Yes, and so I think the big takeaway from this major stress reported by teachers is that if you look at the top, physical exertion, lack of opportunity for growth or advancement, those are in the low 20s, low to high 20s major stressors. If you look at the stressors that are the bigger stressors, and adoption of new initiatives without proper training or professional development is that last one at 71%. Negative portrayal of teachers and school employees in the media, uncertain job expectations. Those three are three items that are not in our control. Physical exertion, well, I can get up, and if I need help, I can get someone to help me. My control. Lack of opportunity for advancement or growth. Okay, if I want to do better, I can get that master plus the 60, I believe. All of those things are things that I can do. But the ones that are more stressful are the ones that I have no control over what the media says. I have no control over what is rolling down to me. And so we need to talk about that. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that in addition to the major stressors that have been reported by teachers, is the pandemic. There's no getting around it. The pandemic has been just a booger of a situation for nearly every profession. But teachers and educators have been hit particularly hard because there are so many dual relationships that intersect when we think about who we are as teachers, but also what we have to do. And so if you look at, the stress and what has impacted teachers, Black and African American teachers have been more likely to leave because of stressful work conditions, and they've only been exacerbated by the pandemic. And then, you add to that many teachers having to figure out how to teach remotely and care for their own children, incredible stressors. And again, these are the type of stressors that are out of our control. And so the ability to have someone like Benjamin on your team who can lead the team in a reflective exercise is just a priceless gift that a school system can have, or a team within the school. Excuse me. Next slide, please. And so if we talk about the physiology of stress, I love this example that was drawn or put together by one of our colleagues. Which does the brain see first? If you look at that, one of the things that most people, if we were together, I would ask people to raise their hands. And what we've learned over time is that most people say the T-Rex. And then I'll ask why. And the reason why is because we are conditioned to look for threats. And so as we go from left to right, like many of us do, most of us scan from left to right, we come up, we look at that, but out of the corner of our eye, we see the T-Rex and we're like, okay, let's see what that is. The brain sees the T-Rex first. Now there are two parts of the brain that are involved in this. And to do a quick tutorial, there are three parts of the brain. There's the frontal lobe, which is our front part, which makes up most of our brain. And that's what most mammals don't have as developed as humans. And then we have the hippocampus, or the inner brain, sometimes referred to as the primitive brain. And that's the brain that is the emotional center, sees the stressors. Next slide, please. And so what happens when we see that T-Rex is that the brain starts ticking down a list of things, the normal responses to a frightening situation. And if it determines that there's a possible danger, then there might be the fight response. There might be the flight response, or there might be the freeze, where the body, in order to protect itself, will just shut down and people or animals pass out. And that is the danger mode. If we go to the next slide, and we say, well, what if someone lives in a constant state of danger? What are the implications of that? What might that look like? And so this is what a lot of times I think is kind of like that ability to always be prepared to move. And I liken it to when I used to coach my son's Little League baseball team, helping children understand the concept, if you're familiar with baseball, of what it is to be in the field and to be ready. And baseball is a game that can be a lot more complicated than it looks. And so one of the things we when you're teaching baseball is that if a team is on the field, the players have to know how many outs there are and where the runners are. And so if you have a person on playing second base, that person has to think, okay, there are 2 outs and there's a runner on first. If the ball is hit to me and I'm the second baseman, if I just take the ball, step on second base, the runner is out, game is over. But what happens if it's a pop fly? What happens if the ball goes really close to the first baseman, but I still have to get it. Do I throw it to the first baseman? Do I tag the runner? Those are the things that you're kind of training your brain to go through the list of things. And so as we think about what it is to live in danger or how to respond, our frontal lobe is often always kind of ticking down. What do I do? What do I do? Next slide, please. And so this is where it can get to trauma of sorts, as if when we get really overwhelmed. And so one of the things that I think is really important to understand is that if we live in constant danger, if we become conditioned to being to experiencing trauma, the inner brain, or that part of the hippocampus that I talked about, is working just like the frontal lobe. And so we may be safe, but we may still have moments where we feel as if we're being chased by however many T-Rexes there are. And this really is something that explains, if you think about veterans who come back and they've experienced an IUD or improvised IED, improvised explosive device. Just realized what I said. The ability, what happens is that when that happens to someone, a significant event like that, that inner brain doesn't have a calendar or a time part to it. And so even though it makes sense that I'm in the States, I am safe, to hear that loud explosion, there's that part of the brain that says, I gotta move. It kicks in. And this is where we have to be able to balance the two. And this is where the work with the Benjamins of the world, the people who are able to say, let's lead an exercise of calming down, of being focused, of allowing these two parts of our brain to work in concert, is really important. And they'll never say that, but that's what's happening. And so I'm a storyteller, and I know we're short on time, so I'll be really quick. But I'm from New Orleans. I moved a month and a day before Katrina. And because I hadn't started my new job when Katrina happened, I got called by the city and the medical center where I was working to say, can you come back and help us? And so I was able to get a flight down there 2 days after the rain stopped. There were still bodies in the street. My job, interestingly enough, was working with the people who were collecting bodies and being giving them emotional clearance to go back out in the field. And so I saw bodies, but I didn't have to collect bodies. And so it was a very difficult time. And what would happen on every day, I was there for like 2 weeks. The Harris Casino was the command center. And on a regular basis, these white vans, no window, a driver and a passenger in hazmat suits, you couldn't see any other physical attributes, would pull up. There was a chaplain there that would say some words. Everything would stop. The chaplain would say his words, and then we'd go back to work. Then another one would come. And what came with that was the stench of death. Now, several years later, I was living in Colorado Springs. My kids were like, oh boy, here it comes. This white van I looked and saw it, and they were excited because it was a bread truck, and they loved the smell of fresh baked bread. But I found myself cutting off my sense of smell because I was prepared for the stench of death. And so for me, it was a real example of how my inner brain, my middle brain, or my hippocampus was saying, prepare yourself, prepare yourself. But for them, it was something that I used to enjoy doing with them. And so this is a very real experience that we have. Now, if we take it to the classroom and we think about what are the experiences of the children that we teach, or what are our experiences? of having to not only cover our class, but perhaps cover someone else's class, and the stressors of that. Now, we will also talk about later, perhaps, things like cortisol, and that's the chemistry that can be really toxic for brain development in the very young years, but it's equally harmful for adults to have too much of that. So we'll talk about that. But this is what stress is. Stress is something that we live with, and it's something that, if you think about it, we actually have experiences managing it. And so one last example, we've talked about the deer. We've talked about the poor soul being chased by a dozen T-Rexes. If you've ever had the experience of walking through the woods and you see a deer or a group of deer and you step on a twig and they hear it, they stop, they look up. Now remember, they're primitive brain heavy. And so they make a quick decision: flight, or fight, or they pass out. Those are the three options that they have. They don't think to say, wow, there's a long thing in their hand. It might be a long rifle. It might be a walking stick. They don't do that. One more move and they're out of there. Now, people, we're at a convention. We're in Cincinnati. And if you're from Cincinnati, I just pulled that out of my head. And I decided to go out to enjoy the nightlife of Cincinnati. And I'm walking back to the hotel, and there are not a lot of people out now because I've had a good time in Cincinnati. And all of a sudden, there are footsteps that are coming up behind me, and they're moving fast. For that moment, we go on high alert. And then those footsteps go right by us, and it's someone who's out for an evening jog. No threat. What do? Some of us take a sigh. Some of us just breathe. But we start to calm ourselves down. The frontal lobe has kicked in and has assessed that we need to ratchet it down. And again, when we understand how this works, and we're able to use the gifts of people who are able to lead us through reflective experiences, we're able to have more control over the toxic nature of stress. And so the next slide, I believe, will be taken by my colleague, Pamela.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks also for those really intense personal examples that you shared. I think that really helps to illustrate what it's like to be in a constant state of activation. Just to say, I feel like a lot of us are activated by kind of what we've seen in the news lately, and just kind of the onslaught of violence that
Absolutely.
seems unrelenting. I mean, I feel like a lot of us have been activated, and this is a safe space. We're here to think through healing-centered strategies, but it's just something that a lot of people need right now. And we can only imagine, we can well imagine what it's like to live in this state. With respect to what this with respect to how this relates to job-related activities for educators and providers, kind of being in this constant state of activation could lead to burnout. And I think we all have a sense of what this looks like, but just to be more specific, it could be a situation where you're starting to lose interest in your work. You don't feel like you're very effective, and you may doubt that what you're doing is worthwhile. So I do a little bit of clinical work in a local school in DC that's a high school and middle school. And I've definitely seen this not only among teachers, but also among the leadership team this year, coming back from the pandemic and sort of lurching from crisis to crisis with if there was going to be school during Omicron, sort of dealing with or helping to build staff capacity to deal with all that kids were coming back from the pandemic with. And I've watched the leadership team at my school sort of really try to be as flexible as possible with staff and still staff leaving in droves. I think it's part of a national situation, a national crisis that's going on in the education sector. And, it's the end of the school year, and there's now a lot of turnover in the leadership team. So kind of all of this has impacts on community wellness, and something we're really all focused on addressing. So some of the other aspects of this phenomenon, they're listed here on your screen in the light gray. Emotional exhaustion, and this could look like increased feelings of strain, tension, anxiety, and frustration. It could include physical symptoms of fatigue and insomnia. Kind of this idea of depersonalization, when you feel removed from yourself and from others in the workplace. And then a reduced sense of personal accomplishments. So feeling that you're not achieving your goals as you have in the past, feeling that you are not or cannot make a difference in your job. And I think, in our first community of practice session, we kind of all reflected on some of our motivation for entering this kind of child and family facing field and a helping profession. So kind of to feel a little bit distant from the goals that ground you in this work is also what happens when folks start to get burned out. And it's not unusual during kind of normal functioning, not in this endemic or end of pandemic phase that we're in right now. It's not unusual to feel some of these signs of burnout some of the time or occasionally, but when it's most of the days that you're experiencing these signs of burnout or these symptoms of burnout, then it probably warrants some changes in the way you're approaching your work. And even for some of the folks that I work with, it's been really dramatic of leaving the profession and sort of getting out of the education sector. We want to be able to support people in staying in this sector if this is the work that speaks to your heart. So let's see. Oops. Go to the next slide here. And just I think Mike touched on this really nicely in the early slides about thinking about what's in your control and what's not in your control. And, I used to teach in a teacher education preparation program in a college of education years ago. And I know this is something that when I taught people who wanted to be teachers and school-based providers, this is not something we went over in pre-service education. The fact that when you are a teacher, when you are in the classroom, when you get there, when you're practicing, you are in a situation where you have a lot of responsibility and very little control. It's not the same for other professions that are also much better compensated, like surgeons. They don't have this situation of high responsibility and low control. They have high responsibility, but also high control. So this is nothing we tell people before they enter practice. How very little control you have over what's going on in students' lives, and other things that it might impact functioning in the classroom. But it's part of it's part of being a teacher. It's part of this profession that's really hard. So kind of with all this in mind, the discrepancy between the demand of the work and the person's ability to fulfill the demands, and that being a big part of the job, sort of we want to think through what are the strategies that we know of, that you all have access to or can think through, that sort of helps you manage these things that are inherent to teaching and being in schools and being providers. And we can think of it as both during this time that's been really difficult for folks in schools, or during other times in your career where there's a little bit more control over things. So let's go ahead and do another activity together here. I'm not going to go ahead and open the Jamboard or anything, but I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can see everyone, and people can just come off mute or put things in the chat. So we just wanted you to think through reflecting on what you've learned today from Mike about good stress and bad stress, and sort of the neurochemical basis of our body's response to stress. And just what I just shared about burnout. we'd love for you to share any coping strategies that are kind of specific to burnout. So kind of drawing on what you shared in the Jam board earlier about coping with stress, but specifically this job related burnout that you know now or that you wished you knew at the beginning of your career. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so we can see you all, and folks are welcome to come off mute or use the chat here. Let me open the chat for a second here. And Mike, you could also feel free to jump in here. And, are there some things that you know now about burnout that you'd like to tell sort of, the version of yourself that was just entering practice?
Wow, one of the things that, and I come from a family of educators, and the one thing that all of my aunts and uncles who are educators have shared with me is that we get into this profession because we care. And it's that ability to understand that caring has its cost sometimes, but how do you manage that? How do you make sure that you take care of yourself? And that's the one thing that they've always have been really good at doing, and they're all 30 plus years in their careers, because they've always taken care of themselves. Now, admittedly, things have changed a great deal since they have started. But the one thing that they often said is that being able to trust that because you care, you will be all right and you will do the right things is important. But the one thing that you have to do is to be able to take care of yourself in order to do the work. And that is becoming just, not only is it like that tribal wisdom that teachers in my family share among themselves, it's that idea of that we as the helping professionals, or we that study emotions and all that, are really coming to the table saying, yeah, we need to find ways to support our people. And so someone is posting, I wish I would have asked for help. I felt I had to do it. And of course, I didn't have my chat. I wish I had help. I felt I had to do it no matter what was added on. I came in second and did burn out. And so that's a cautionary tale.
I think so.
And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
And so, but at the same time, I'm glad that the ability to finally say, you know what, I need to take care of myself. And one of the things about doing this work because we care is that we're altruistic by nature. We're those people that will give up of ourselves. But the reality is that it's not a selfish act to say, I need me time. And that's it's a challenge for some of us because it's counterintuitive, but it's a tool. And it is a tool that will take you from good to great. If you're able to say, hey, it's time for me to take care of me.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I just want to share something quickly. I think so. At the beginning of my career, I worked as a school psychologist in the Pacific Northwest in elementary school settings. And I remember one day I was there at like 7:00 at night. And the principal said to me, wow, Pamela, you're infinite. And I, at the time I was like, okay, good. I'm doing a good job. But like reflecting back, that is not good. That is not healthy. And just for me to think of like, okay, I can give of myself infinitely to the kids I'm working with. And that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I did not build in any time for self-care. And I also sort of left clinical work for a while because the practice was unsustainable for me, and sort of coming back to the work now, I'm really trying to build in the kind of, healing centered approaches and kind of building more time into my schedule for that. So the things that Benjamin is helping us with. I want to make sure that we have time to kind of take us back out of this space where we focused on self-care, or we thought about it. We thought about our own it's kind of thinking about ourselves in this work is a hard thing to do. So we really appreciate you doing this. And I want to make sure that we have some time before, right? I mean, people might have appointments on the top of the hour, or they might have to get back to, their busy schedule at the top of the hour. So I just want to make sure that we're taking a few minutes, and Benjamin can help us with an activity. Joanne is also going to put into the chat the survey from this. Please fill it out. It will help us plan for the rest of the COP. And we'll see you back here in 2 weeks. For work, we'll be joined again by our colleague Shai, and we're going to be focusing on the domain of physical well-being. I know a lot of you all had goals about getting more sleep or getting a little bit of exercise. So we'll be able to kind of work with you to flesh that out a little bit more. So I'm going to pass it off to Benjamin now, and I'll share my screen again so we can look at a pretty picture to focus ourselves here. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Thanks, Pamela. And thank you, Mike. Thank you both for a wonderful presentation. All right, everyone. We'll end with a similar exercise as we started with. So taking a moment to come into your space, to re-arrive into your body, into your heart, into your mind. Letting your attention rest on the sensations in your body, just whatever is present for you. Letting the thoughts and emotions that have been present the last hour just wash over you. Again, let's bring some sensitivity to the emotions that are present for us right now. So see if you can bring your attention to the sensations in your body that show up as emotions. Often they're somewhere in the belly or the chest. And see what's there for you, bringing some openness and curiosity. Maybe there's some energy moving. Maybe there's some tightness or some tiredness. As you bring your attention to these sensations, not pushing anything away, just allowing whatever is here to be here. It can even be helpful to just quietly repeat that mantra, allow, to yourself as you tune in. Just quietly saying, allow, allow. And now we'll practice a little bit of self-compassion to close. So if it feels supportive, maybe bringing your hands to the heart area. Tuning into the breath for a moment. And taking a moment to appreciate yourself for coming today, for listening, for tuning into your emotions. Appreciating the gift that you gave yourself by being here today, the gift that is for yourself and for others. Taking a moment to appreciate yourself. Now you can gently open the eyes. I'll let you guys go 2 minutes early. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to Pamela and Mike and Joanne. And the invitation is to carry some of this energy that you've just cultivated into your next activity, some of the self-love and appreciating yourself. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you at our next meeting.